Hello and a warm Collisions YYC. Welcome to my guest this morning, Mr. Stéphane Hamel. How are you doing, Stephane?
Doing great. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it is absolutely my pleasure. We're gonna geek out a little bit today. I'm gonna say that. I'm gonna give that lead into my audience. We're gonna get into data privacy, data analytics, where things are headed, maybe indications of where things are other parts of the world. Thinking GDPR, thinking if you live in this space, if you're in business, you need to be aware of this space. And I think as marketers, we engage in it, but sometimes we deny it that it's coming. I don't know. Anyway, I'm leading in a little bit from our past conversations, and you've been in this industry for a long time. Let's put it that way, 20 plus, maybe even 30 years. You're an educator at the University de Laval. You work at you provide some education at the U of C. You're also a consultant. Give us a little bit, like, what's your world? What's your everyday? And without going into, when I was 6, but talk to me about a little bit of your own journey working in this ever evolving space.
Yeah. Well, I guess the line that connects all the dots is that when I started with a computer science degree like 35 years ago, right away I had to work with data. And in fact, my internship was about analyzing some data from healthcare. And even at that time, we had some rules regarding privacy, obviously. And then eventually the web came out. I started, working on websites, developing websites, and so on. Continued my education with an MBA specialized in e-business, and did a lot of consulting with different projects, different industries, different size, all kinds of verticals. And again, the connecting dots were always, how can I leverage data to make better informed decisions? And up to a point where obviously I was working with clients where they were sharing, access to their client list without asking it. I met Christopher
Privacy
Wiley.
was not always treated the same as it is now. Yeah. We'll get into even that journey of it needed to get treated differently because it maybe was treated a bit recklessly.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was kind of one of the aspects that led me to think more about privacy. I met Christopher Wiley, the Cambridge Analytica whistleblower, on stage here. I did a Q&A with him in front of maybe 1,000 people in the room. And that was a tipping point for me. Of course, the data leak from Desjardins, which the source of the leak was someone working in marketing. And it got me to think about, okay, I see those patterns on a daily basis, either with my clients or in the industry, where it's more like, okay, let's collect all the data we can in case we need it. We want to be customer centric. So we want to learn as much as possible about our customers. So we ask a bunch of questions. And we want them to, we will advertise to them through Google and Facebook and so on. And we know they do so much with the data. So it gradually led me to think more about privacy and finding myself in a position where I realized that I was challenging a lot of my peers. Let's say my professional network changed a bit. I realized that what I was pushing for, what I was advocating for, sometimes people don't want to hear about it.
When you say people, are we talking about businesses that are their data is their oil? Kind of data is the new oil. Like we all remember that cover of many magazines. Like Harvard Business Review actually posted that many years ago. That is kind of became their secret sauce of the way they can not only access the data, but then what they do with it. You give me the fear that you're talking about turning off the tap.
Yeah, well, yes, maybe in a way.
Yeah,
but
I don't know. Yeah, I just posed that as a scenario.
Yeah, but maybe in a way, what's amazing is most of the time the data they have, they're not really leveraging it to its maximum. So I think the pattern is more like, it's not necessarily the data they have, it's how they do marketing online and rely so much on the big players like Google and Facebook and so on for their advertising. So they will be sharing, for example, both Google and Facebook will tell you, trust us. send us your list of phones and emails, and they're going to be hashed. They're going to be encrypted in a way. So it's a secure way to transfer it. And
Mm.
trust us, we're going to match it against the data we have, and we're going to do lookalike audiences. So in doing that, you're sharing emails and phone numbers because you can match in different ways. But let's say you're just sharing emails, and obviously those players they know so much about everyone
Yeah.
that you're sharing a lot of personal information just by sharing the email. And in fact, the Privacy Commissioner of Canada actually it was on Depot. That was, when you go to the store and they ask you, oh, do you want to receive your receipt by email?
Yeah.
Well, guess what they do afterward? They take the email, they take your transaction, they send it to the likes of Facebook and Google.
Yes.
And from a marketing standpoint, it might sound great and positive because it's wow, okay, now they know that you just purchased a sink for your kitchen, so you're probably renovating your house or
Yeah.
your kitchen at least, and therefore they can advertise products that will fit this profile. So yeah, we can say okay, that's fine, no issue. Yeah, I don't
Mm.
care if they know I just purchased a sink at Home Depot, but it goes so far, so
Hmm.
beyond those simple things, and it's the sum of all those things that becomes really a privacy issue.
Let's go all the way back. And I love what you said at the beginning. Like, we're collecting it just in case. So what you just gave an
Mm-hmm.
example of very tangible. And I think one example that sticks out for me is, I think it was a woman somewhere that was sent advertising for having a new baby because she had
Mm-hmm.
purchased a pregnancy test. And
Yeah,
so the algorithm just pumped that in. And then all of a sudden people in our house are like, what's going on? Why are we getting targeted by this? And I think that's something, that's an old story. And I think we all
yeah.
live that every
It's
day. But
a
the gym,
target.
yes, but
Target. Yeah, it's funny you say she was targeted because the company was Target. Uh, that's
yes, that's
exactly what
right.
they
That's
did.
right. Target, for those of us who'd like to, I don't know if anyone still calls it that. But just in case, with the intent of customer, centricity, and I love the benefit of the doubt of like, well, let's collect it just in case. That can sound positive. Well, I
Mhm.
want to be more customer centric, which can also sound positive.
Yes.
But for all of us who live in the digital world, it can feel really creepy really quickly.
Hmm.
Where's the balance even that if we go back to just thinking about data hygiene and data intentionality at a company level? Like, we'll talk about privacy, but I'm running a business and I'm like, but I want to do good with this. And then I like what you said about, but I let it outside my walled garden and I send it to the big, which is, we all know there's only a handful now of global players that control that. Let's just talk about even the balance of that as the person listening who's like, well, I'm a company owner, I'm a manager. I just figure I'm safer to save it than I am to not.
Yeah. Well, uh, there's the what we call the generally accepted privacy principle. Yeah.
Mhm.
There are like 10 principles, and all the regulations are based on those 10 principles. And there's things like transparency and consent and notification if there's an issue and security, of course,
Yeah.
things like that. And I think the basis is that marketing is about building trust. If you don't have trust, you don't have anything, right? So
It's at the bottom of the pyramid all the time. Yeah,
yeah, if
100%.
you
Yeah.
go at the bottom, like if you don't build the trust, you don't have a relationship. Um, so for me, I advocated for a while, and I still do. I created a hashtag on LinkedIn called "No Consent, No Tracking,"
Hmm.
and some people got it in the wrong way, but the idea behind it is pretty simple. If you're going to advertise to someone, ask for consent. Like if sometimes I go to a website and I just look around and I'm not really interested that much, and like I don't want to be receiving ads for the next 3 months just because I visited the site once or something
Yeah.
like that. That's what the advertising, space, the networks and everything, that's how they grow over time, where the mere fact of visiting a website, it, using a third party cookie and so on, it was starting to track you across the website, across your navigation in the internet. And
Because it was being treated as the like very high, but it's an intent
yeah,
signal. There's obviously
it's
an
an
intent
intent.
here. You're here,
Yeah,
and so we're going to start measuring that and ranking that. How long did you stay? Where did you go? What did you click on? And it starts
exactly.
to
And
build that profile. Yeah.
that's the role of doing analytics. Like it's
Hmm.
understanding the customer behavior. Um, but if you walk on the street and you cross the path of someone, and that person turns around and starts following you, it's creepy, right?
That's a fantastic way to say it. All of a sudden, I'm looking over my shoulder. I've got the spidey
Yeah.
senses going off. Yeah,
So
that's
it's
so
not
funny.
because you visited a site once that
Yeah.
it means that you're necessarily interested in whatever they are offering. So there needs to be a stronger intent. There needs to
Hmm.
be a stronger signal that you are gradually building trust. And yes, you want to receive the advertising. So, of course, the easiest, well, now with regulations like GDPR and the Law 25 in Quebec, you have to ask for consent before enrolling those visitors into your marketing tactics. So that's in theory, it's supposed to solve that issue.
Hmm.
So yes, when I go like I'm using Brave as a browser and an ad blocker called AdGuard.
Okay.
So by default, all the trackers are blocked. But when I trust a brand, when I like the brand, I just remove the blocking and say, yeah, sure, I
Trust.
want
Well,
to
you actually
receive.
probably literally click trusted. This is a now
Oh yeah,
trusted.
mhm,
Yeah.
yeah,
Like using that word, I think is very important. Mhm.
yeah. So yes, I want to have a stronger relationship. I trust the brand. I like I want them to reach out to me and so on. So I think it's like the uh, it went too far in one direction where the balance of power, the balance of control was not in the hands of consumers. And that's why we have regulations now. That's why, at the Canadian level, we have PPDA right now. It
Mhm.
dates back to the year 2000. And at the time, it was really leading in terms of privacy, but it's like 24 years old. so so we have the proposal for Bill C-27, which is revisiting a bunch of different laws, including a law related to AI also. But when you look at it, it comes back to the basics. It comes back to transparency, to consent, to control. Transparency, consent, control. If you start with that and you have that in your mind when you do marketing, it's like, okay, you want to be customer centric. Is there anything better than being transparent and asking your users, what do you want? And putting yourself in the shoes of your users is like, okay, if I do that, are they going to like it? Are they going to find it creepy? By and the challenge I guess we have is oftentimes that people will say, well, I don't care if they know. It's too late anyway. They know everything. I cannot change that. They're too big to change. Um, but the problem is when you realize that your data has been leaked from so many different companies. Like my data has been leaked so many times. Sometimes it's just the email. Sometimes it's email and password, and sometimes it's other stuff. So you have to use a password manager to make sure that you don't use the same password anywhere else.
Yeah.
Because if it leaks and you use the same password, they're going to try it. The hackers are going to try it everywhere they can. Um, and from there, they can do more. But when it gets to the point where your identity is stolen and you wake up one morning with a $25,000 loan, a car loan from a bank that you've never done business with, that is
Hmm.
frustrating. And that's exactly what happened
I
to
think
me recently.
frustrating might be an understatement.
It pissed me off.
Yeah. No, did that happen to you?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay. No. So that felt like a very real story. Yeah. Up to your
Yeah,
point though, the consequences of what can happen of like
yeah.
made appear innocent. I don't care. I have nothing like I heard the comparison. I'm going to butcher it, but it was like not caring about privacy is like not caring about free speech because you don't think you have anything to say.
Yeah,
Like it
exactly.
still matters. It still
Or
matters.
another one, another one, which I like to use sometimes in conferences, is uh, privacy is like going to the bathroom. We all know what you're doing, but you still close the door.
That is very good. I'm gonna adopt that one. I like that. I still close the door, and sometimes I lock it, even though no one's gonna try and break in. In that case, because we feel vulnerable. And why do I trust that you're not going to come in? Because I put a door in between. Talk to me. Oh, I have so many questions, but thinking about so many companies, larger organizations, the responsibility, the focus that gets put on some of the bigger, larger global brands. But this is a worldwide, the playing field is massive and it is unbalanced. So we might have a regulation in Canada that says if you're a company in Canada doing business and castle compliance, even, hey, I can go buy a list and hit anybody in the US, but in Canada, oh, I shouldn't do that. How do we even get into the challenge of even a medium-sized enterprise trying to play this game ethically and morally sound and follow the rules where their competitors are not following the rules at all, or that maybe feels that way?
Yeah, well, that is the counter argument I get also very often from businesses. Is like, yeah, but if I do it and my competitor isn't doing it,
I'm going to lose out.
I'm stuck, right? Or the other thing is, if I play fair, I'm going to lose a competitive advantage, or it's too complex. Also, it's too difficult.
Yeah.
Like dealing with those consent banners and auditing and doing privacy impact assessment and all those are all things that if you work, it's funny because my roots are in computer science, and back in the days we were doing data flow, looking at how the data goes from one system to another. Right, to understand the implication of what we were doing. And now we have to do data flows from a privacy standpoint, which is essentially the same thing. It's looking at how do you collect the data, where do you store it, where does it go into different systems. So that's from a privacy standpoint, it's a new role, it's a new responsibility. So you need to find the people to do it. Typically, people in computer science with a computer science background, they know how to do that. But now it comes from a different angle. It comes from the angle of privacy and compliance and marketing. So it's interesting to see that I was actually surprised that following Law 25 in Quebec, I was expecting that there would be huge demand for skill sets that are at the frontier of technology and privacy.
How do we do it? How do we make it real?
How do we do it? Yeah, exactly. But
you sounds like you didn't see that though.
Not that much. Surprisingly, not that much. And maybe one of the reasons is that, especially from a Quebec angle, is that the Commission d'accès à l'information, which is responsible to impose fines and do really control.
Quebec I'm big by Quebec does love its groups that do that.
Yeah,
they do love putting those things in place from a social government structure. There's a lot of regulation and the ability and willingness to fine.
Yeah. Well, yes, they have the ability to do it, or in fact, they have the possibility to do it. The problem is they don't have enough resources, and so far they haven't imposed any fines to anyone related to the new regulation. So I spoke with some companies that are like, okay, what's the risk? What is the likelihood that I will get a fine? Well, right now it's pretty thin. So they will just continue.
There's no carrot and there's no stick.
Yeah, exactly. So from a business standpoint, again, it's a little bit of, we'll do what we have to do, but check. It's done.
And oftentimes, if you're not getting pressure from some of the big platforms, we often follow the lead of like, well, if they're not worried about it, then why would I? Because I'm going to sooner or later dovetail my data into that platform to create access to customer, right? Or future customer often.
Yeah. And also on top of that, the fact that when I do audits, what I usually find is that, okay, if there is a consent banner in place, it's like the legal compliance aspect. Okay, we have a banner. We're asking permission.
It's a checkbox. Yes,
but when I look at the actual implementation, I will see that there are a bunch of trackers that are still firing even when people don't actually consent.
Mm.
So on the surface, it feels good. There's a consent banner. The privacy policy has been rewritten, and all the legalese is there that nobody reads anyway. But from a technical standpoint, it's still going on, and there's and when I say trackers, it's not just Google and Facebook. It's oh, you have a chatbot coming from a third party. Well, that chatbot can actually collect personal information.
Yeah.
Um, you have different features that comes from third party players. Well, they do collect information. If you look at the what's the name again? There's a map of amazing work of mapping the tools that are used for marketing in different categories, and then there's like 10,000 of them.
Oh, that the one that started off like years ago was very small,
Yes,
and every year just
yeah,
grows, and now it's so small you have to blow it up to even look at it. Yes,
yeah,
I remember using it in a presentation maybe 10 years ago, and it was you
yeah.
could actually look
It's
at it. Now
crazy.
it's insane. Now
It's
it's you
insane.
can't
In
even
fact,
see it. You can't see it.
you
Yeah,
can't even see the logos. But
yeah.
when I use that visual, what I say is that the common point between all of those over 10,000 different tools that you can use for marketing, they're all collecting data, all of them. Uh, as soon as you have something on the internet, it is collecting data. So, the loan that came out of nowhere, I don't even know where they got the data. I suspect it's from the Desjardins data leak, but because that's
Okay.
the richest. But I'm not sure. And then you end up in fighting against TransUnion, Equifax, contacting the bank, fighting against them because of course they don't want to tell you anything because it's private, it's
Of,
secure. Yeah, but I'm the victim here.
and it's also them admitting culpability too, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, of course.
of
Yeah.
course. Yeah, yeah. So thinking about it from the business perspective, and it can be very overwhelming. And I think you're right. I'll do the minimum. I'll do some things, but my
Mm.
competitors. What about ultimately the consumer still has power,
Yeah.
and we can decide with our wallets. We can decide with our mouse clicks.
Mhm.
There's clearly an awareness now, especially even younger generations, about what is private and what isn't. Are we seeing a shift where people are now demanding it? Going back to we still have power as a customer, even though we sometimes give it up very willingly, I think, especially with the devices and all of the agreements we click yes to without even reading. And do you see a trend where companies will be quote unquote forced to change because customers, maybe younger, more educated, more savvy, will just look at the world differently and demand it?
Yeah, I think right now we recognize that some companies have great values, like be it employment, be it the environment, be it just being good corporate citizens.
Hmm.
So those are part of the core values of an organization, and if they try to fake that, usually it turns bad for them.
Yeah.
So I think in the future, privacy, the way they handle the data, the way they handle privacy, is going to become a core value, uh, part of the brand value of any organization.
Well, it also
And
falls under ESG to a certain extent. The
yeah,
social and the governance piece.
yeah,
Technically, I would see most of these, and I know that's just an acronym that's been very popular the last few years, but this would fit squarely under the S and the G.
yeah. Well, and sometimes we say privacy is not a legal issue; it's a brand
Mm.
value issue.
Yes. Now
If
we're
you take
getting
it,
back into the marketing world of what
yeah,
brand, what are
because
you putting out there to the world, and what experience are you providing or not providing to your customer? Mhm.
exactly, because if you see
Mm.
it as a legal issue, it's an expense, it's a cost, it's a pain in the ass. It's
Vraiment.
really like you want to get rid of it. But if you see it as a brand opportunity, then it's an investment for the future. It's a brand value. It's how you do business. And
Mm.
eventually
Yeah.
consumers will have a choice. You go into the front of two different stores. One looks very, you know, ugly and dirty and everything, and the other one is clean, transparent.
Yeah.
It's very clean. Where are you going to go? So eventually, over time, I think privacy is going to become a differentiator, not for everyone, because some people will still do business with the Temu and Shane of this world, that
Yeah.
are absolutely amazing in terms of dark patterns and gamification and collecting data, and that it's amazing. I don't even understand why they are still legal in Canada. Um, And then you will have other businesses that play fair and do business, in I would say in the right way. Um, and for back to what you were mentioning earlier about even medium-sized businesses, if they do business in multiple jurisdictions, um, it becomes even more challenging because in
Yeah.
theory, they have to comply with all those different regulations from different
Hmm.
places in the world, and they're not experts, and it can become very costly to try to, be at the expected level everywhere. So there's two different school of thought. One is, well, it's part of the business. So if you do business somewhere, you have to, of course,
Basically just compliance.
follow the rules and everything. Or you can have an approach where you elevate the bar and you pick the regulation that is the most advanced and stringent in a way,
And you follow that. Yeah.
and you follow that across the board.
And
And
as a marketer, then you tell that story as well. You let people
yes,
know that you're doing that and use
you
it
know
as
why?
as a brand value prop. Yeah.
You know why? Because when you go on a website and you even dare to look at the privacy policy, oftentimes the first statement is what? Your privacy is very important to us.
Yeah.
Well, that's BS. Because if you look at how they handle privacy, well, it's very important, but it depends where you live. Like if you live in the States, it's the Wild West. It's a
Yeah.
free for all. It's like there's regulation is fragmented. Sometimes there's no regulation and so on. If you live in Quebec, and I see that across Canada right now, I see it a lot. Companies that are doing business in Quebec, they put a consent banner because they have to. But if you live anywhere else in Canada, there's no consent banner. They're just doing as before and collecting everything. So when they say we care about your privacy, to me that's total BS, because if they really cared, they would apply the same rules to all of their customers, all of their audience. And maybe that is going to change when Bill C-27 gets eventually enacted, because consent, it's probably going to be very similar to what we see in Quebec. So companies doing business across Canada, get ready. It's coming eventually.
And is this also just that was a very good asterisk. It's coming sometime later.
Yeah,
I'm not sure exactly when.
exactly.
But this is also, I think, a clear path of technology moves at a certain speed and regulation moves at a different speed. And technology does not have the same restraints as policy does.
Yeah, yeah.
And governments have a hard time keeping up with anyone, let alone the world of big tech.
It's finding the right balance between
Yeah.
regulation that doesn't stop innovation and regulation that protects citizens. It's really finding the right balance. And of course, there's a lot of people that are saying, well, privacy is stopping our ability to innovate. And I'm challenging that idea, because it actually forces you to be more creative instead of doing just business as usual.
It's a bit of an
works.
excuse. It's a bit of a
Yeah,
blame, right? I'm going to
it's an
blame this,
excuse.
so therefore that's my reason not to change.
Yeah. Well, same thing with AI. If we want to make a leeway
Yeah,
for
well,
AI,
it's hard not to, because one is becoming more tricky because of the implementation of the other.
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
So what are you seeing
just
happening with? I think we could still keep talking about marketing, but from anyone who's in it, it's so easy to also put your head in the sand. What I'm hearing you
yes,
also say is start thinking about it from a brand. Start thinking about it truly from, if you're going to be customer centric, that's an easy thing to say. Actually living
yes,
it and thinking about it as I was getting to this debate. Brand is not your logo and your colors and your website. It's the
no,
experience your customer has. And privacy is a big part of that experience. Just to say something that's obvious, but not always in companies does it get looked at that way, in my opinion.
yeah, absolutely, you're right. Well, something happened this week on LinkedIn, which is pretty interesting. My LinkedIn stream was flooded with people saying, "Sneaky bastard, LinkedIn! You introduced a new feature. You gave yourself the right to use our posts and our profiles and everything to train your AI." And it's actually, when you go in your profile, your settings, privacy, you will see there's a new option that basically grant the permission to LinkedIn to use your post and everything. And it's on by default.
Of
That's
course it is. That's such a big tech trick.
So they did it silently. They didn't announce it. I'm not even sure right now if they actually announced it or they just put it there. They didn't update their privacy policy before. They put it on by default. It's the total opposite of being privacy conscious. It's the total opposite of what GDPR and the law 25 in Quebec that mandates that it's supposed to be privacy by design and by default, which means you don't turn on something that collects personal information
Without
by
permission.
default. It should have been off, and then it's up to, in that case, LinkedIn, sell it to us, convince us that we should turn it on, not the opposite. So now there's and maybe when there's enough people that say, hey, you're not supposed to do that. And I don't know what's going to happen. Are we going to get sued or I don't know, but they did a really, really bad move in terms of brand reputation. And now there's a backlash. Maybe it's because of my echo chamber on LinkedIn, but everyone is talking about that.
And if you go to settings and you go under data privacy, it's data for generative AI improvement is defaultly turned on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I hadn't seen any of those posts. I wouldn't even have known. And I'm really curious, just as we're talking, if I turn it off, will I be silently penalized by LinkedIn? Because LinkedIn they all love to penalize you for like, oh, you're not playing, you're pushing people off the site. Well, we de-rank your posts.
And because it was on by default, does it mean that everything you posted since you created your account has already been used to train AI? And it's too late. So even if you turn it off, is it going to delete what it had? I doubt it.
I would bet, if I was going to bet $5, I know which way I'd bet.
Yeah, exactly.
But yet I've always, so funny. I read an article years ago and it was a con artist. And he would sell bridges that he didn't own. It was like one of a famous sells a Brooklyn Bridge kind of story. Mm-hmm. And he's like, once you know what people want more than what they're willing to give up, you've got them. And I've always thought of this that way. I get the convenience and I get this interconnectivity and I get my dopamine. So in turn, I give up my privacy. Yeah. And it always feels like a con artist is in my feeds and I'm willingly going, oh, absolutely. Here's my bank account. Oh, here's my passwords because I get this other thing in return that almost is superficial to give them something very substantial. I don't know, it's been my loose brain always tying those two things together. Like a big con artist who's hustling me and they're better at hustling me than I'm at not getting hustled.
It's where does the power stand? You know, who has the power? And when the imbalance is too great, there needs to be a change. So I don't know what, for LinkedIn, I don't know what's going to happen. Are they, and interestingly, they didn't turn it on in Europe because of GDPR. So if they had said, "Oh, we have a new feature, we would like you to turn it on because it's going to help us.
Here's the benefits.
AI,
Here's the benefits. Yeah.
And as let's say in my case, as someone who has expertise in marketing, in data and privacy, I actually want my expertise, my knowledge to feed the machine. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I'm teaching, so obviously I'm okay with sharing my knowledge. I want it to be used for training AI more than, let's say, let's take a scenario where everyone that works in privacy get freaked out by this and they all turn it off. What will remain? People who maybe don't know as much or spread misinformation and stuff like that. And that's what's going to be used.
Back to your thread from the beginning of where's the data and what is the data? Yeah. I'm on it right now. The setting controls the training of generative AI models used to create content. When the setting is on LinkedIn and its affiliates, super vague, may use your personal data and content you create on LinkedIn for that purpose. For what purpose? Like, what are we doing? Like, it really says nothing. And it tells you they really can give it to anyone they want. Is really what it says.
Yeah.
And in the context of our conversation, that's a pretty scary 2 lines right there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And I think in this case, we know that obviously LinkedIn has a very close relationship with Microsoft. And Microsoft has its own AI, and it's all part of the same. But affiliate might actually be what? Anything else? We don't know. So, yeah.
Purposely vague.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And also,
And
I
maybe
love
it's,
like none of these companies do anything by accident or without a huge amount of thought and strategy, typically. And we've all sat in many boardrooms where it's like, I'm like, oh, there was a lot of debate before they decided to like, there's only one way, let's do
absolutely.
it. Yeah, there wasn't
Yeah.
like, Joe in development forgot or Jane.
Yeah.
That's not what happened. That's not how it
So
happened.
I hope that.
But yeah, fair enough. That would be worse. That'd be scarier. I read an
Yeah.
article years ago. They said if all the developers in the world or all the tech support people went to lunch at the same time, we'd had about 15 minutes before the whole thing would fall apart.
Yeah. Exactly.
As a computer science, you may be like, that's not too far off.
Yeah. Well, deploy on a Friday afternoon. That's the usual answer to
Yes.
all the issues.
Yes, of course. Of course. Yeah. Never launch your website on a Friday afternoon or launch your platform. The students in your classroom,
Mhm.
are they people aspiring to grow into this field? Are they marketers that are coming back? Are they business leaders? Université Laval, which is more of a formal program. I think you said your words were a bit more of a crash course, what you teach in Calgary. Who cares? Who's showing they care about this by wanting to learn more? I guess is my question.
Yeah. Well, I teach different classes. One is marketing, which is one of the early course in the MBA program, and often
Okay.
they are enrolled in MBA specialized in digital. So those are the concept, the basics of marketing online. The other one is web analytics,
Hmm.
where we want to understand the behavior of people coming to our website. This is a more advanced class. And again, part of the MBA program in digital marketing. At Calgary University, it's one of the late course in the program. It's a data science program, and
Okay,
I'm
it's tied to data
teaching.
science. Okay.
Yeah, it's more like data science and marketing. So a few case examples of how can you leverage data science for marketing purposes, for doing
Mhm.
advanced analysis of understanding your customers and stuff like that. And then I've created a new course. Universities are, complex beasts.
That's yes, that was well said.
When you, so I've been talking about creating a course, a continued education course on Law 25 and marketing for 2 years, and finally I'm going to teach it for the first time in a few days. And this course, it's really a short course for continuing education. So people that are already in the workplace,
Okay.
typically working in marketing, that wants to understand more about the regulation of in Quebec, but obviously we touch on GDPR, we touch on PIPEDA, we touch on CASL, which is the anti-spam regulation.
Which is that's
Um,
what? How old is Castle? 15 years now. Like it's been
oh
around
yeah,
for
yeah,
like at least.
yeah. I think at least yeah. Um, and all the I'm not a lawyer, so my perspective is, with all due respect for lawyers, they understand the law. They will be able to tell you, oh, this is Article XYZ. It says thus and thus, and they will only address it in the context of a specific situation. So you will never see lawyers on LinkedIn uh, putting out, uh, their opinion or a statement. Usually, we don't see that. We don't see, oh, in such situation, this is what you should do. We very rarely see that because, as part of their responsibility, when they apply the law, it's always within a specific context. It's
Okay.
always
Yeah.
within a very specific situation, and they will not extrapolate on all other scenarios. But I'm not a lawyer and I have opinions. So I can take a case, I can
Uh,
take a situation and say, well, in my opinion, this is the scenario, this is what you should do, and so on.
mhm.
Um, and sometimes I'm wrong, but what I want to do is open a conversation. What do you think about that?
One
Is
as
it
an
the right
educator,
one?
you want to get people thinking, right? Ultimately,
Yes.
I would guess, yeah.
Yeah.
Think
A
through it,
very
think about it from different perspectives.
different perspective. Very simple example of that is, when you go on a website and they offer a white paper or they offer a webinar and stuff like
Yes,
that, and you
the
say,
classic lead magnet.
classic example, yeah,
Yeah.
lead gen, classic example. They ask for your name, your business, and stuff like that. And you say, okay, yeah, I want the white paper or I want the webinar, so I'm going to provide my information, and they automatically enroll you in their marketing newsletter.
Hmm.
Well, based on the principles and the law, you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to enroll people in. So the purpose for collecting data, it needs to be specific. If you give your data for a white paper, it is for the white paper, not for enrolling into a newsletter. There might be a little checkbox that says, yes, I want to enroll into the newsletter, but it's not supposed to be on by default. And it's not supposed to be, I saw that where if you remove the check mark, you just can't get the white paper. So you go there for a purpose and they try to use the information. So of course I will get people saying, well, it's a B2B, maybe it's a B2B context. So the regulation is slightly different. It's a legitimate interest. You know, it's lead gen. You are for offering something for free, so you are entitled to enroll them into your marketing effort. So there's different opinions, and unless it's actually tested in the court, or the Commission d'accès à l'information du Québec actually does something about that, we won't know for sure. It needs to be tested before we have like flagship examples that will wake up everyone and say, geez, we're doing that.
Precedent and case law going together makes for a powerful. But talking about, it's just kind of an annoying salesperson. Like if we want to go back to the human to human interaction, you made the point of you cross someone in the street and they start following you. Then they start poking you. And they start putting articles in front of you, and they start trying to put magazines in your pocket. You'll like this because I saw you walk by a store that sold widgets. Well, I've got an article about widgets.
Big ass on the main street, you know what it is.
Yes, yes.
They follow you. They give you pamphlet. They poke you.
Yes. So if you think about that, back to your point about how do we decide we want to operate as an organization, and I do find sometimes with organizations that I've dealt with that are large and sophisticated in what they do, but maybe not in marketing, they might not even realize that they're employing sales tactics digitally that they would never employ with their actual sales force. You got a 20-person sales team. Hey, your sales team is going all over town, just annoying random people that happen to look at your banner. No. We would the CEO, we would never do that as an organization. But yet your digital media team is doing that and you don't even realize. Like that's an interesting dichotomy when you think about brand experience.
Yeah, but it's different because of the data, because it's easy, because it can be automated. It's like people saying,
yes, because I can do it without thinking, therefore I do it.
It's the scale. It's the scale at which it can be done. So it's like people saying, big deal. We don't care if my name, my address, my phone number is out there in public. I don't care about it because back in the days, you know what? You had phone books and you could look at anyone's address and you got the phone number and everything. But it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing at all because the scale is different. The automation is different. So we cannot compare. Oftentimes we cannot compare. Sometimes it's good because it's a good analogy, but sometimes it's not a good excuse because it's totally different now.
I would argue that if we actually thought about it more like a customer-centric sales process, and we actually did think about it like that, we maybe wouldn't use those tools in the way we're using them. Like just going back to me, the customer. Selfishly, I'm customer-centric. If I'm interested in something, I'm very open to that information. But when I'm ready for it, the call that I want to receive, I don't want to be hit in the face with it.
Yeah. And otherwise, you know what? There are other ways of doing marketing to reach a potential audience. We've been conditioned that marketing equal advertising equal ads on by Facebook and Google that collects so much data and tracks us everywhere and do supposedly very targeted advertising. But contextual advertising is doing a comeback. So if for example, if I'm looking at a media website and I'm looking at the news this morning, and I go in there's an interesting article about the new car model and so on. I guess I'm interested about cars. I guess the media company, the owners of that media
platform
website could put some contextual ads about Toyota and cars and stuff like that in that section. And even once I've signaled my interest in that in cars, they can put contextual ads in other places as I continue to navigate on the website. and they don't have to rely on the Google and Facebook tracking all of my data everywhere I go, because I, there's a lot of discussion about the media industry in Canada because,
Well, it's
Facebook
top of mind right now with the tax that's coming in, and
the
there's a
tax,
lot of
yeah,
it's a shifting landscape, and I might
and
argue
the
that
revenue they're losing and so on.
yes,
Well,
they're finding ways to make it up. Yeah.
they created their own, their own issues because they relied so much on third-party ad networks to do advertising instead of having maybe 50% of the ads based on context on their own website.
Okay.
So that would be an interesting shift. But I think they waited for too long before doing that, and they're now caught in a battle of giants, and we know which side is winning
Who
right
usually
now
wins?
because,
Yeah, 100%.
yeah,
They have all the you give them all the power, then you ask to give some of it back. It doesn't usually happen that way.
Yeah. And there's a tax, but they will just the tax will just be filled to the customer.
The customer. We're already administratively we're already setting that up to it's kind of a flow through where the companies themselves are not actually feeling the bite at all.
No.
The advertiser and because we got addicted to that drug a little bit, and now the price of the drug is going up and we can't stop taking the drug. That's not a friendly analogy, but it feels a bit like that. It's an addiction. It's well, I guess my price of cigarettes are going up. I'm going to keep it's almost like sin tax if you think of it that way.
There's something reassuring for marketers when they see that they spend, let's say, $10,000 a month. They know how much they spend, and the Google and Facebook and so on will tell them, "Oh, you had that many eyeballs on your ads, and out of those, how many clicked, and you can see how many purchased." It's reassuring that I know how much I spend, and on the other side, I know how much I'm getting back. But of course, they won't say that a very large proportion of those eyeballs are actually bots and fake clicks and stuff like that. Yeah.
And if you take a lot of organizations, especially in the mid-size, where maybe marketing isn't their main focus and it isn't their most sophisticated team, but the accounting team or the COO or the VPs are want to see those numbers, it creates a very false sense of, well, now I can see numbers. The old joke, 50% of my marketing is working. I just don't know which 50%. It's been around forever. And I still think it hangs around for good reason. But you take non-sophisticated marketers, and no offense, a lot of people think they're marketers and maybe they're not, but show them numbers and they all of a sudden feel comfortable.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's a false god. It's a false god.
And I actually work with some clients where I tell them, you know what, you're spending a lot on Google Ads, for example. And they have budget for that. But you know what? On your website, the checkout process, it sucks.
Yeah.
So
it's broken.
Yeah. So, but we don't have budget for that. What? You do have budget for Google Ads. Lower your Google Ads for a while if you have to, but fix the issue on your website, because those people coming in, if they don't like the experience and they get frustrated, imagine someone who's put a bunch of stuff in their shopping cart and they want to purchase and they can't, or the experience is really bad and the trust is broken. You spent all that money on Google Ads for absolutely nothing. So it always amazes me.
I would actually say you spent it for a negative, because now the potential customer is frustrated because you added too much friction in the right place. Yeah.
And they might talk about it on social media and so on.
Because they actually legitimately wanted to potentially buy from your company, but you made it too hard.
Yeah, exactly.
We worked with a car dealer one time years ago, and they had run a bunch of campaigns, and they were telling us that they were so frustrated the campaign didn't work. And we got access to their call tracking, and I was like, but there was a huge spike on this day. Yeah. Like, how did you say it didn't work? We didn't sell any cars. I'm like, well, where did it break? We found that was a phone number that no one was checking the message on. but the classic marketing didn't work. I'm like, it did work, but you put and that was very just phone. If you think about customer experience and you think about what happens on so many websites, and as customers, I'm so conditioned by Amazon, by Google, by websites that spend so much on my experience. I go to a mid-sized enterprise who didn't spend that much, but I still demand the same level, even if I'm and they say, well, we're B2B, it doesn't matter. I'm like, I completely disagree, because that B2B customer just bought his or her whatever on Amazon and had a great experience 5 minutes before they went on your website.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of Amazon, there's a classic example of what is a dark pattern. When you do a purchase, every single time you do a purchase, how many times did it insist on being a prime customer and making it very, very obvious? That choice is so obvious, and no, I don't want it. It
It's
is
less
just a
obvious.
teeny, yeah. And they do that. It's always there. So this is a classic example of a dark pattern, where
Okay.
they repeatedly put it back in your face, and they highlight what is, well, it might be beneficial for the customer, but it's certainly benefit them more if they
Absolutely.
insist so much about it.
The numbers around the prime revenue that I've read, some of those
Yeah,
specs, it's crazy the money they made
yeah,
off of that.
exactly. So this is a good example. Or simply when you see a consent banner, and there's a lot of debate around that. When you see a consent banner, my opinion is that the agree and reject should be same size, same color,
Mhm.
close to one another, no highlight, no nothing. So
That
it
is
needs
never
to
the way it
be,
is, ever the way it is.
yeah. So oftentimes the agree is very bold, very, it's in your face, and the reject is hidden in a way, or it's like you cannot reject there. You need to personalize and go into a different screen. So what is the solution to that?
Purposely creating friction on the thing they don't want you to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what is the solution to that? What happened is customers are using ad blockers and they don't even see the freaking banner. And even if they say agree, they will click anywhere. The
Hmm.
trackers will not actually work. So if you don't do it right anyway, customers will eventually take it in their own hands, and they will the percentage of people, consumers that use ad blockers keeps increasing
I
over
was going to
time.
ask that back to what's
Yeah.
happening as a society and where we're,
Yeah. Well, you know what?
yeah.
Very interesting anecdote. I've been asking, when I do conferences, I ask the audience, do you use an ad blocker? And obviously, the audience is typically marketing people. So if you look online and you search for ad blockers usage and stuff like that, you will find statistics that are very different depending where you look. But let's say it's about 30%.
Okay.
When I did a couple of years ago, when I did that conference with Christopher Wiley, I asked the audience to use an ad blocker. At least 70% of the hands went up, and they are all marketers. So I use that as an example of, it's like you work for Honda, but you will not purchase a Honda car because you don't like them. It's like you work in marketing and you use an ad blocker. So 70% of the marketers use ad blockers when 30% of the general consumers use ad blockers. So it's kind of the flip side, the opposite.
Yeah.
Just it shows that there's something wrong. And why is that? Is it because marketers understand how it works and they don't want to impose on themselves what they impose onto others?
I don't want to. I don't want to get addicted to my own drugs. Sorry.
Yeah.
That's a terrible. That's a very.
Yeah.
That's a crass. But it
And
feels
sometimes
so much like that of what we get addicted to, and the dopamine and all the
yeah,
psychology behind what's actually going on.
exactly.
And like speaking about gamification, humans are fairly easy to gamify.
Oh yeah.
Much
Yeah.
easier than
You
I
know,
think a lot of us want to admit.
I read something recently, I think it was in the 70s or 80s. It was estimated that on a daily basis, we were exposed to 500 brand signals. So it might be
Mm,
an ad on TV, it might be just, seeing the Coca-Cola red color. That's a
yeah.
signal, right?
Yeah.
And recognizing that, oh, this is, we see just a little bit. And these days, it's something like 5,000 a day brand
I've always heard
signals.
the recent number. I've never heard what it was like, because
Yeah.
I think we all know it's exponentially growing.
Hmm.
And the challenge is you might ignore a lot of it, but your subconscious picks up on things. Like there's so much going on that
Yes.
because we're also all moving 100 mile an hour at all times.
Hmm.
But we're picking up. Like you said, the word signals, I think, is very important to consider. Like,
Yeah.
well, I never even saw that. Yet we've all seen studies where someone was taken on a drive around town, and then they were asked to draw something, and it was directly influenced by things that were planted on the drive.
Exactly.
Like I love those,
Yeah.
and that you
Yeah.
just described the web.
Yeah, exactly. We still get influenced by it, even if our
Yes.
subconscious, we don't really realize, but it's there. Uh, it's funny because this week I was doing some tests and I had to disable my ad blocker and I forgot it was off.
What did
And
you
then
buy, Stephane? What did you buy?
the following morning I went back on on the news website and surfing around and so on, and was like, wow, they changed the website. But I didn't realize that it was like 50% of the space was used by ads everywhere. Like the visible space that I could look at in my browser, 50% of that was actually ads. It was a media and news website. So, and people tell me, well, but if you block the ads on the news website, you prevent them from getting revenues. It's right. They're right. It's true. But it's up to them to get their act together and use consent, but not under consent, but
Yes.
context advertising. If they had context advertising, the ad blocker wouldn't have to block it. It would be in the context served by their own web server, not a third party somewhere. And I would see those
versus the equivalent of direct mail, just blasting everyone.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So there are solutions from a marketing standpoint and from a revenue standpoint for those media websites. I talked about it with some of media website owners and people in marketing and stuff. They realize that they're in a bad position in terms of revenue and so on. But I think their reaction is, yeah, but it would be too hard to change that.
Yeah.
Like, it's a matter of survival. If you don't change it, you won't survive. So they need to find different ways. And of course, the easy way for the media websites, the easy way is what? Is ask for subscription.
Yeah.
It's force people to create an account. Like if you go on Radio Canada or CBC, if you go on the French equivalent of Two.TV, which is the TV on demand, they force you to create an account now. So what happens? They ask for personal information. They ask for your email, your name, maybe I don't remember, maybe gender and age and stuff like that, because they want to know about you and so on. Those are all personal information. So as a consumer, the more brands you interact with where they want to pull the string and get your personal information, from a personal standpoint, your risk footprint is exponentially growing. One of them is going to have a data leak. In fact, probably most of them are going to get a data leak eventually. Right. So it's not good for privacy, because each of those brands are trying. They were told by their agencies, oh, third-party cookies and so bad are going to go away. So you need to collect more first-party data.
Yeah.
And as they do that, of course, they collect more personal data, and the risk is increasing.
As a business, so much we can talk about. Just kind of, what's your kind of checklist? And I know that that's way too simplified for a very complex topic, but let's start with an individual user. Is it I should get off this and put an ad blocker on my browser right away? It's like let's just start with the consumer. Let's start with the individual citizen, the digital citizen.
Yeah. So use an ad blocker. The problem is there's a lot of ad blockers that are actually collecting data.
You let the wolf inside the house. Yeah,
exactly. So I use Brave. Brave is like Google Chrome, but without all the tracking, right?
Okay.
And Brave comes with an ad blocker called AdGuard, which is excellent. So Brave and AdGuard together, that's a starting point. The other thing, there's a great company in Toronto called 1Password.
Okay.
Install that and use it, even if you have to pay for it annually. Equifax and TransUnion, they offer you a super package that it will monitor your things, and it costs almost $50 a month, right? If you multiply that, TransUnion plus Equifax, that's $100 a month just for you, and then you have your spouse. That's $200 a month to check your privacy, to make sure you have. And oftentimes it actually doesn't work, because when they alert you of a change or a privacy issue, it's actually too late. Instead, subscribe to 1Password. Make sure you use 1Password all the time, every time, everywhere. And if there's a data leak, at least it's going to be isolated to.
You've walled off each individual instance of a login. Is really what.
And also, from a user perspective, it's a lot easier, because when you go on a website, you just click, and it logs in. It's super easy. If you need to create a new account, super easy also. It will generate a super strong password for you. It's synchronized between your different devices, so you have the same password everywhere. And very secure. So one password, built in Canada, built in Toronto. Great part.
Okay.
Those are the starting points.
Those are the basics.
Yeah.
Which for the average individual is probably already a significant improvement to a lot of our situations.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Sadly, if you think about the case of Desjardins data leak, all of that, and the Equifax of this world and TransUnion of this world wouldn't have prevented the data leak. There's two main sources of data leak. Either it's internal, like in the case of Desjardins. So a rogue employee took the data and sent it outside of the business. Or the other one is hackers getting access to your systems. But oftentimes the source of data leak is 70% of the data leaks. Actually, the root cause is social engineering. Social engineering, where you have, and now with AI and deepfakes and so on, maybe you've heard that recently. The number of scams where they impersonate the voice of your child or the voice of someone you know. They don't even need the video. So when we think of deepfake, oftentimes we think of the videos of, Barack Obama and, someone impersonating Barack Obama or Trump or, Biden and so on. But it can be simpler than that. Actually, when you get a call that there's no voice at the other end, you say, hello, who's that? And so on. Actually don't say anything, because they just need 3 seconds of recording to be able to reproduce your voice with a deepfake. So you don't say anything.
3 seconds. That's crazy.
Yeah. It's crazy.
It's at a point, if the number's not in my phone, I just don't answer.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's like 2, 3, 4 times a day. Like, it's so annoying.
Safest way, don't talk to anyone.
Yeah. Live in a cave, become a monk. Yeah, I understand. Yeah. Yeah. But yet we're going to go out in the world. It's like there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothes. There's no such thing. There's no such thing as truly safe, but there's making better choices.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's the amount of cybersecurity incident is growing at a rate of 30% per year, something like that.
It's kind of not if, it's when, right? You're going to be impacted.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And AI makes it, on one end, it makes it easier for the hackers to do whatever they want to do. On the other end, the tools, it's like the police and the thief. On the other end, the tools are getting more sophisticated also. Yeah. And they use AI to detect the patterns and the threats and so on.
It's exciting and scary all at the same time. I don't even know what else other you, if you're interested. And I think it's also so easy, as back to just being citizens, to just like, I'm too busy to deal with it, or I'll deal with it later, or I don't want to pay. But the consequences of anyone I know who's had identity theft, it's a mess. It's a disaster.
Yeah, it's a mess. Yeah. And it's frustrating because when you try to fix that, you lose hours trying to solve it,
and almost get treated like you it's like the victim who doesn't want to come forward, because you actually are going to get treated poorly.
Yeah, exactly.
Because all these institutions and organizations actually don't want to admit to their own potentially bad behavior, or let's just say incompetence. Let's just keep it simple. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Intentional or otherwise. Yeah.
In the case of my identity theft and the loan and so on, is an interesting, also an interesting thing. We talked about installing Brave AdGuard and using 1Password. Okay. The other thing you need to do is push as much as you can so that you can go on Equifax and TransUnion and block your credit check. Actually, in Quebec, there's a regulation that came into effect in 2023, February 2023, I think, that actually forces TransUnion and Equifax to give for free an option where you can go online and you can block your credit check. So if someone wants to do an identity theft and open an account on your name, if they check one or the other, it won't work, because they won't be able to do a credit check. So if that had been possible in my case,
Would have stopped it.
it would have stopped it. The problem is it's available in Quebec, but not anywhere else in Canada. It's available in the States, but not anywhere else in Canada. Why is that? It doesn't make sense. So there was, if you look on the CBC, and there was the equivalent in French. I did an interview with the CBC regarding that. Why isn't there regulation, or why isn't Equifax and TransUnion doing it on their own, offering this to everyone? Because it would stop so many identity or identity theft or opening accounts and so on for all Canadians. Actually, their data would be better, because right now they're acting as the way they work is basically they swallow whatever the banks are going to tell them. So if in my case, what happened is the bank just sent a change of address, and they said, "Oh, there's a new loan, a new car loan, 25,000," and TransUnion got that information, put it in their records. If I hadn't found it, maybe I would have woken up one day with someone at my door asking for reimbursement of $25,000.
Yeah, or trying to repossess the car that you don't have.
Yeah, that I don't actually have. So it would be a super simple measure if we were all able to go online and block the credit check. One of the reasons they said they don't want to offer that is people will forget about turning it off when they ask for credit, or if you do business with a cell provider, internet provider, and so on, they check your credit. They said, well, people will forget to turn it back off. You know what? I would rather see my credit check being rejected.
That's a lame answer.
Seeing $25,000 on my bank.
Yeah. Versus the company going, "Oh, we're not able to do a credit. Okay, well, let me go do that, or give you it's kind of like this is a trusted credit check, and you click on it, and then it's done, and it is a one-time instance." Yeah. I don't think that's the real reason.
Yeah, and they said, well, there's technical issues to it. Bullshit, because it's already offered in the States, and it's already offered in Quebec. So and actually, I still have it. I moved from Quebec to Alberta, and I had issues and so on. I couldn't turn it off. I was always getting an error, and it took me hours and hours of very interesting conversation with Equifax in that case. And what I realized is that it's still in my account. So they probably made an exception for me because of the moving. What I think happened is in their system, they didn't plan for people moving out of Quebec and going to another province, something like that. Because I actually realized what was exactly the problem, and I told them, this is the issue. So much trouble talking to the right people, because they're all call center agent, maybe somewhere else in the world, and they have some guidelines to follow.
They have a script basically to follow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so interesting. Man, we could talk about this all day, and we haven't even really got into the. I think we have to do a part two of like, okay, now as a corporate entity, as a business, talking about that. I do really appreciate, because all of us as humans, as citizens, live in it. We're all digital citizens one way or another.
Yes.
And I think you hear these pieces of information, you're like, I'm going to change, I'm going to be better, and you drift because it's easier to follow the existing pattern.
Yeah.
Which is leaving the door unlocked and just hoping somebody doesn't come in. But like you said, statistically, someone will. It's not if you're going to get breached, it's when and how. And to your point, it's not some complex digital, like cyber hack. It's social engineering. Okay. You're allowing yourself to be, or you're finding yourself, I don't say allow, you become a victim and didn't even realize it because you said yes to things you shouldn't have said yes, or you gave someone a number you shouldn't have given them.
And the thing is, you won't be able to trace back where the data came from. Like in my case, I don't know. Yeah. I know the result. I know the impact, but I don't know why. And I will never know why, because they won't tell me anyway.
Of course.
But there are things that our government could do. There are things that you can do as a consumer, and there are things that companies can do to prevent that. So let's work to at least do small steps and improve it.
Stephane, I'm very inspired, overwhelmed, and excited about this conversation today. Your passion and deep knowledge for this topic is very, it's inspiring, it's thought provoking, it's action inducing on my part. So there's a few things I'm going to do. So selfishly, that was my own little checklist you gave me. So thank you for that. What's the best way? I see you're very prolific on LinkedIn. If people want to learn more or find out about taking one of your courses, is that a good way for people to get in touch with you?
Yeah, the best way is to just follow me on LinkedIn, Stéphane Hamel. There's actually, as part of the investigation about my identity theft that we actually found, I was able to see that there's a whole bunch of other Stéphane Hamel, but they're on LinkedIn. I'm the most active.
I am the real Stephane. Yes,
I'm
I know.
the real one. Yeah.
We're all unique until we find out that there's many of us out there. But yes, the real one, and you have a great follower base, and you have some good content on here. But thank you for coming on. Thanks for sharing. I'm not joking. I think I see a part 2 in our future. I have so many more questions I want to ask, but that was a really great foundation. And I always want to leave people going, huh? Okay, I need to think about this more. And I think we did a good job of that. Maybe we overwhelmed everyone. I don't know. C'est la vie. It's an overwhelming topic, but like so many things, you have to one bite at a time, right?
Yeah. Thanks again for having me. That was a great conversation.
It was my pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.